EastEnders. Before that, Here and Now with Juliette Morris.
Tonight, the IRA spy left out in the cold. His cover's blown. Now he's living in fear.
If the IRA want to get me, they can get me. There's no doubt about that. I'm more concerned about who they may take with me.
Kids turning to alcohol, the growing problem of underage drinking.
As young as 9 and 10.
What was it? Cider.
Alcohol is as dangerous as ecstasy.
And an everyday story of feuding folk that split a Norfolk village.
I think now the only way he can do it is sell up and get out.
They're a little clique of people who, you know, have got this village by the throat.
Those stories here and now. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now, live from Manchester. Our first story tonight takes us into the shadowy world of a police undercover agent. It's a dangerous enough occupation at the best of times, but when the organisation you're informing on is the IRA, the penalty is death. Martin McGartland infiltrated the IRA and spent 4 years passing on vital information to the security services which saved lives until his cover was blown. McGartland survived by going into hiding, but now he says he's been abandoned by the very authorities he risked his life to serve. And tonight on Here and Now, for the first time, a former intelligence officer speaks about the way Martin McGartland has been treated. Wendy Robbins has the story.
Lord, grant eternal rest to the soul of thy faithful servant, and comfort and console those who have been bereaved.
The mass card is traditionally sent to grieving Catholic families on the death of a loved one. It's meant to be a source of comfort.
With sincere sympathy from your friends in Lancash.
Only this mass card wasn't much comfort to Martin McGartland. It was a warning from the IRA offering a prayer for the repose of his own soul.
I got frightened. I mean, I'll admit I got frightened, but I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, it's not every day you get something like that posted through your door.
Martin McGartland was one of Britain's top spies in the IRA. Here he's heavily disguised because he's on the run from them in England. This woman has lived next door to him for the last 4 years. And she's only just discovered that the friendly Irishman next door has got a secret past. Now she too fears for her safety.
I think it's absolutely terrible. I'm frightened. I mean, he shouldn't be there. I mean, people in Blythe know who he is. They know where he lives.
Now this here is toughened, it's laminated glass, right? And you'll never get a petrol bomb through this.
Basically worried that people may come looking for him. I mean, we may live next downstairs. Could be my door that they come to.
I have to make sure that I have the means of defending myself. If the IRA want to get me, they can get me, there's no doubt about that. I'm more concerned about who they may take with me.
At the age of 17, Martin McGartland was persuaded by the security services to infiltrate the IRA. He saved dozens of lives and millions of pounds by tipping off the police about hit squads and bombings. In England, he's been given a new identity, Martin Ash, but 4 months ago the authorities insisted on taking him to court on a driving charge, which led to his cover being blown. He now feels betrayed by the people who promised to protect him. A former intelligence officer, speaking out for the first time, agrees.
I think he's been treated unfairly. He saved a lot of lives. He did a lot of good. He seems to have been dumped.
As Jerry Adams once said, the penalty for informing is death. The IRA have executed about 100 informers. McGartland very nearly became a statistic himself when the IRA rumbled him. He was lured to these flats in the heart of Republican territory in West Belfast. And when the door closed behind him, up there on the 3rd floor, a gun was put to his head and he was tied up to await his interrogation and execution.
I was actually in the house and asked could I go to the toilet. And when I went into the bathroom, the bath had been filled almost to the very top with water. I was in no doubt that that was going to be used to torture me, and I just jumped head first through the window.
Incredibly, he survived, but his Belfast days were over. He left his home and young children, who've since been told he died in a car crash. A new life and new friends, this time in Northumbria as Martin Ashe, the identity arranged by the security services as part of his resettlement. He'd kept his secret safe for 6 years, until May.
I couldn't believe it. If I read that paper once, I must have read that paper about 5 or 6 times. I could not believe that Martin Ashe wasn't Martin Ashe.
He'd been taken to court for having driving licences with different addresses and faced a jail sentence. He'd warned the authorities that he'd have to reveal his identity as a defence. He was acquitted, but it was too late. His cover was blown. It was like living back in Belfast, only this time there was no offer of resettlement.
I went to the Special Branch, who gave me advice to move back to my house. More or less, go back and wait for the people coming to get you, the people who may be going to try and kill you.
Sam Cushnahan represents a Belfast organisation known internationally for its work with victims of terror groups. He gave evidence for McGartland in court and says ceasefire or no ceasefire, he's a prime target.
My advice to the Northumbria police would be to, for God's sake, give Martin McGartland peace of mind. That's the only thing he wants. And to relocate him as quickly as possible.
But the government told McGartland's lawyer,
there is no immediate threat requiring your client to move house. And we do not accept liability for his relocation costs.
This book, written earlier this year about his undercover life, is part of...
Costs.
This book, written earlier this year about his undercover life, is part of the reason why McGartland believes he's being punished by the authorities, and so does the former intelligence officer. Why do you think the court case was brought in the first place?
I think there may be a hidden agenda.
Would it be anything to do with the fact that he'd written a book and had spoken out about his activities?
I would think that, yes, that would be a reason.
The IRA haven't yet got to Martin McGartland, but they did get to his brother Joseph. He was abducted from his Belfast home a year ago. He was hung upside down from railings and beaten with iron bars.
I asked for some security for my home because I was very, very worried. They told me that they're going to make an arrangements for me to go and see the crime prevention officer. They go out and put locks on the windows.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh at that. I mean, Northumbria police, I mean, must not be in touch with the situation here. Martin McGartland would be one of the IRA's main targets.
The government does not agree, though the position argued by their lawyers is confusing. On the one hand, they concede there is a threat against him, but they also say it is not such that he needs to move immediately. He's been offered a new identity, but is still in the same house. They reject any suggestion that Mr. McGartland has been treated unreasonably and remain committed to providing the appropriate support. The government have now offered what it considers to be that appropriate support, £3,000 to move out. But Martin McGartland says this will hardly compensate him for the amount he's invested in his home, and who'd buy a house from an IRA target anyway. But he hopes to move on before the IRA move in. In Belfast, one of his former captors is walking tall. Chico Hamilton, seen here with Jerry Adams and Martin McGuinness at Stormont 2 weeks ago, is now a peacemaker, a devoted member of Mr. Adams' entourage.
Jerry Adams and his IRA colleagues are getting what they want in life, and people like me are suffering.
Martin McGartland certainly saved an awful lot of lives. Agents like him are extremely important, and they should be looked after a lot better.
They reassured me that, look, you look after us and we will certainly look after you. And I mean, at the end of the day, it looks as if no one's going to be looking after me at all, other than myself.
No, I didn't.
They then